Hello and welcome to Rare Cuts Media Society, the podcast that looks at hidden media gems while we all have a potato. With your host, as always, I'm Andrew Jagoda, and with me we've got Eric Hathorn, who looks annoyed at my joke. How you doing, Eric?
It took me a second, and then I was more annoyed that I was like, "Wait, potato? What?" And then I got yeah, because we have a potato, in the movie, this one, dare I already come up front with it and say this one is more my kind of horror movie. So it wasn't so bad for an October. I feel like I got through this October pretty easily.
Great. And we've got Mike Ross. How are you today, Mike?
I'm doing well. I mean, I really could go for a potato. I mean, perfect baked potato. You coat it with a little olive oil. You season it with some kosher salt. You bake it in the oven. You pull it out, cut it open, put in some butter and a little bit of salt. That's all you need. Potatoes are amazing.
No toppings?
I am a butter and salt only potato connoisseur.
And of course, we'll get the rebuttal from Rob Lachek. How are you today, Rob?
I don't want no potato. I want some of them pickled onions and slather it on with that thing.
It's British cuisine, right? British cuisine.
Vinegar and pickled onions.
Those spicy potatoes. All right, and so we're doing our holiday arc now, and of course it's Rob's pick, so we'll let him take it away.
All right, so I selected the movie The Old Dark House. I've always had a soft spot for classic horror movies. So when I got the October pick, I'm like, I got to find a classic movie. Probably would fit Eric's wheelhouse of not being too scary, because a lot of them aren't super scary. But regardless of that, I wanted to pick a classic one. So I started thinking classics, really. Nosferatu, even like newer, Evil Dead, 1931 Dracula, Candyman, The Mummy. But I'm like, it's not quite rare enough, if you will. So then I got to like Frankenstein. I'm thinking, all right, who directed Frankenstein, right? Who is the filmmaker of Frankenstein? I'm like, okay. So I looked around and it's James Whale. So then I looked at his filmography. I'm like, all right, anything else I know? And I'm like, I've never heard of this movie. And he was the horror movie right after Frankenstein was released, The Old Dark House. So I gave it a whirl. I was sold. And it wasn't because of the potatoes. Maybe the pickled onions, but not the potatoes. The Old Dark House was released in 1932. And as I said, it was the next horror film that James Whale made after Frankenstein. It's set in the UK after World War I. How the story kind of begins is you have this couple, Philip and Margaret, traveling by car, this like terrible thunderstorm, washing out roads, making it almost impossible to get where they're going. They're also traveling with a friend who's just like holed up in the back seat, don't even realize for like the first like couple minutes, which is kind of weird, but all right, whatever. So as they're driving, they get stuck, but the storm is Old Dark House, hence the name. So that's when the story really starts to kind of heat up. The inhabitants of the house are an aging brother and sister, Rebecca and Horace. So both appear to be unmarried. They have a creepy butler named Morgan, played by the iconic Boris Karloff. And then later on, the two other people join the fun. Some travelers also caught in the storm. Sir William Porterhouse and Gladys. So that kind of sets the table for the film. So it's classified as a horror film, but kind of posed the question, is that wholly accurate? I think we kind of hinted at it. Or is it also a comedy? So I think it has definitely elements of both. I think it's still definitely more so a horror film. But let's get everyone else's thoughts. And Why would you say one or the other? Well, maybe both. Like, what do you think? I see you smirking.
It's hard to classify this one. For me, it feels unfinished, and so it definitely starts off with the humor, and I thought that we were going to be going in that direction. I was actually kind of excited about it because it had like the spooky nature, like right from the get, and just kind of, if you think of some of the Three Stooges short films that had more of kind of a spooky element, they still had like that tone, that kind of uneasiness or horror tone to it. And I thought that was the direction we were moving into. And then it's like a switch is flipped on and off throughout the movie between the horror and the comedy and romance. And so I feel like if this movie had another half an hour to kind of explore these themes and kind of intertwine them a little bit better, it would have been more effective. But largely, it is kind of a romantic horror comedy.
Quite the combo there.
Yeah.
Eric, what do you think? Where do you think it fell in the spectrum of horror, comedy, or romance, as Mike is thrown into the fray?
Yeah, so I'm gonna kind of go along the same lines, but like in a different angle. So sometimes you have an old movie that could be a horror movie, and it seems funny because it has just aged poorly. But this one, I don't think that's the case. Like, it's not that the horror has aged poorly. It's that they did legit try to put some comedy and romance in it with the horror. And I'm gonna bring it back. I'm gonna bring it back to my buddy pal Walt Disney over here, because I have to get in there and I have to make that Disney reference pretty quick. But one of the things that like Walt Disney would always talk about with his movies, and if you watch something from around the same time as this, like Snow White, he wanted to have aspects of the movie to kind of like delight the viewers and to get them to laugh, cry, be scared, like kind of have all the emotions in one movie, because then it kind of brings you through an experience. It's like, I laughed, I cried. It's that whole thing. So I think that like this kind of tries to do the same thing. Like, it tries to like bring you on an emotional journey. And then also too, like the humor, like I'm not a horror movie connoisseur, but like I would guess that like the humor was meant for that kind of, comic relief, right? But like that relief from the intense moments, like to throw in one of those funny things there after we had like the real intense like bedroom open window scene with the distorted mirrors thing.
I gotta ask
yeah.
about that scene in particular, because it's weighed on me. Why did she open the window in the middle of this huge storm?
Well, how else were they going to get her dress to be so flowing?
Like,
they didn't have any industrial fans.
Because I watched it the first time and she opens the window, I'm like, oh yeah, it's windy out. And then like second watch, I was like, why did you go open the window? And then like totally turns into olive oil with the way that her arms are just like, and then she's like knocking over a chair as she runs away.
Yeah, that is a weird choice for sure.
So, Jagoda, we need to get your take on this. Horror, comedy, romance, drama. What else are you going to throw into this?
So I'm going to throw in something a little different.
Ooh.
I think that this film inspired teen horror as we know it. Because teen horrors, if you think about it, it starts off all light and fluffy like comedy. The college kids are joking, playing pranks on each other while they're driving in the car, joking, laughing at the guy in the back, whatever. And then it turns to horror. But then it ends turning back to that comedy with when he's like, "Oh, it was nice seeing you," and like what did you just live through?
That was
It's a
so
lot.
bizarre at that moment.
Yeah, it reminded me of movies like Fright Night, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, or if you ever saw Cabin in the Woods.
I love that
I
one.
love Cabin in the Woods, but it's like that. It starts out with that whole like, haha, it's it's a teen movie, ha ha ha, fun, and then it gets dark, but not super super dark, and then at the end you're like, oh, la di da, nothing happened,
It's got dark in the title.
Well, yeah, and I mean, since it's black and white in a storm, I mean, of course it's physically dark, but it never gets so dark that I felt like I was in true horror. I was more like, this is a teen horror. So I feel like a lot of those 80s, 90s, even early 2000s teen. Yeah, there you
go. I have a question, just because I think of any of us, it'd most likely be you, Andrew. Have you read the novel that this was based on?
No, but I'm planning on it now. I was looking it up
because I don't know if it has any humor element to it. That's what I'm kind of curious about.
Yeah, it's based on the 1927 novel Benighted.
Yeah,
it's with an N, not KN, by J.B. Priestley. For anyone interested out there, and I intend to read it now that I've seen this movie, because
they have the ebook on Hoopla through your local library.
Nice.
So I'm shouting that out. Yeah, no, I'm really curious about that. I did extra credit. I actually watched the Old Dark House from the 60s as well. That one is just straight up campy horror, and just like you would expect from the 60s.
Now, I will say, because I saw that one when I was first trying to find the 30s one, I saw it was like the 60s one, and I like double verified in our message from Rob to make sure that I had the right one. So I'm like, okay, 32, because I'm not going to watch two of these if I don't have to. Horror movies are not my thing. So anyways, the 60s one, it was classified as a comedy horror.
Yeah.
So I kind of find that interesting that one was, although you did say, so you said it was like a campy horror movie. Was it more comedy than this?
It was a lot more comedy. It was very overt. I would say horror in the terms of the subject matter, which is more in line with a kind of House on Haunted Hill, but funny, because it's like a bunch of guests come to an old dark house. Actually, it's one guest, and all the people inside are family members. That's some secret pact they have, that if they're not there every single night at 11 p.m., that they forfeit their share of inheritance, and that's why they have to keep going back to this house. So it kind of elaborates, which makes me again curious about like the novel Benighted, if there was more of those elements included, where they didn't have enough time in this movie. But it's definitely comedy, just really goofy. It was directed by William Castle, who actually did House on Haunted Hill. I think he might have even done the Tingler, because I know I brought that one up before.
Yeah, no.
I have.
I have. Last time. I'm just saying no to
I've seen
the Tingler.
So, sure. But no, I mean, I think I actually like the 60s version from more of a comedic standpoint, but I feel like the 30s one could have really delved into like a darker undertone, more serious.
Interesting. So we have a little bit across the spectrum here, from horror, comedy, romance, drama, inspiration for teen slasher films. So it seems like we've got a little bit of everything. So the general idea of the film, right? So we move past that. What about the characters? Let's look at them a little deeper. So there's a wide range of characters here. You have the in-love couple, the swinging bachelor, the rich man with his traveling female companion, the old bachelor and his spinster sister, a creepy butler, an aging bedridden parent, and a creepy pyromaniac. I mean, if I stopped at creepy butler, that would probably been enough for some of these films. But did you have a favorite character or find one of them to be kind of like really, really particularly interesting? Let's go reverse order. Jagoda.
I gotta go with my gal Rebecca. No beds.
No beds. No bags.
And I mean, going off of what Mike said about there being the novel, I kind of want to see if there's more about her backstory, because for one thing, it seems like she is deaf but only hears what she wants to hear. And that whole like, oh, she's trying to be religious and it's not doing anything. It really was interesting to see that kind of, and how it bounced off of Horace and his like, just get me through the night attitude. So I have to stick with Rebecca as my favorite. I think Morgan might have been my favorite if he'd had a cooler name than Morgan.
In the 60s, there's Morgan, and he has a daughter named Morgana.
Okay.
So, Eric, as the horror film aficionado, who did you find the most interesting?
So I mean, everyone was interesting in this movie, and that's I truly believe. I do want to point out though that our Margaret Waverton was the old lady from Titanic. I do want to throw that one out there. She grew up to be the old lady from Titanic and threw the heart of the ocean into the sea. But this is what she was doing before that. I was trying to make this. I was like trying to look at the timeline and make this a Titanic prequel, sequel, something like that. And I just couldn't do it because this is after World War One, and like the time she'd have to go back to England. I guess she could go back to England because she was still alive. But anyways, I digress. So being that it's after World War One, I did read somewhere that it like the different characters were supposed to represent like different people's point of view to like post-war life and things like that. So like that was kind of an interesting way to think of it, as like one of those like these are kind of stand-ins for societal kind of like feelings at the time. So I thought that was really interesting, but I want to give a new title based on the family. So I thought a fitting title for this movie could also be The Violent Femmes. See what I did there?
You're going to be the next host for Svengoolie.
The Femme family. And the one, at least the one was real violent, so the femmes, and they're the violent femmes. But that's no, so like, yeah, each character had their own way to shine in a kind of a weird, different way. And I thought that was interesting. I liked that kind of that, like, that kind of aspect.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. The whole post World War One and the different attitudes, because then it might help make sense out of the different, I guess you would say, disorders each of the femme family has. Perhaps like the fact that Morgan cannot speak is him not wanting to talk about the things that have happened. What was it? Rebecca? Yeah, Rebecca, who has selective hearing. She doesn't want to hear certain things about certain topics. And then you have Horace, who is incredibly nervous about everything in general and worried. And then you have Saul, who is just crazy and ready to kill anyone upon meeting them. Again, these could all be tied together with emotions some folks had in post-World War I world. I don't know how the father plays into that role. The father, to me, was the most intriguing character because it's like, who are you and how did you create these wild mix of children? And what happened to Mom?
Speaking only of metaphor and symbolism, is the father their deep dark secrets because they keep him locked away because he knows their past and their deep dark secrets?
Well, he's not locked away. He's just
he
bedridden.
isn't. That's true. That's right. But like in a way, he's away.
Yeah,
I don't know. You know what I mean?
They don't,
like it's
they don't
not
like to talk about him or interact with him at all. He's the other
right.
up there. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then they do reference they had a younger sister, Rachel, who died, which again that could be someone that's love that you lost during the war. So who knows?
That was even an interesting how Rebecca revealed her sister's dying. They really didn't even say how. It was like she murdered.
Yeah.
Right. So it was a very kind of interesting, definitely give a creepy vibe at the beginning part of the film.
Well, she referenced that she had an accident and that her sister was bedridden and begging for death, and she wouldn't find the Lord or whatever she said.
Saul did it.
Probably.
Could have been. So
She was assaulted.
Oh. So for me, I was definitely in the Jagoda area here, because I was definitely thinking the two most interesting characters, at least kind of, and you can kind of view them a little bit of the same, is Horace and Rebecca. I think together they're kind of like feeding off of each other, like the frustrated, the angry, and then the scared and like very like just generally frightened of everything. I mean, afraid of like the storm is gonna like wash away the house, and Rebecca's just looking at him like, you're just a big idiot. It's not going anywhere. It's on a rock. So I think it was just kind of the back and forth I felt was kind of interesting, of like how like creepy in the way that they played off of each other. So it's like, how do you know, like, where do they kind of, to the point, how did they get that way? So different from brother to sister. But I thought they were very interesting characters just in general in the film. One other thing to kind of to think about is we're talking about the actual actresses here, but the house itself. Did the house kind of fit the bill as a character in this film? When we talked about the scene when Margaret is in the room changing and looking at all the mirrors, and then you have like the long hallways, the wind whistling through. Does the house kind of act as a character here, and does it add a lot to the actual film here, or is it just kind of, it's there and it's just a thing? Any thoughts on that, gentlemen?
I kind of struggle with that kind of idea of the house being a character in this one. Seems like most of, I would call, the supernatural moments, they really did center around Margaret's character. She's like the only one that had those experiences of seeing visions or ghostly shadows, and it seemed like she was traumatized or felt seen by Rebecca when they had their interaction, and that really frazzled her. After that moment, she's kind of off kilter, I would say. So I don't see the house as a true character, but that's my opinion.
I see it in kind of a weird way, because I could see the argument made for it being an antagonist, but because of the storm, it also is the safety in the movie, because they can't go out in the storm. They need somewhere to hide. They need somewhere to be safe. There's the house, but at the same time, it's that constant pressure of is the storm going to blow this house away and kill us all? So it's a weird mix, because in most haunted house type movies, you could say, yeah, the house is a character, it's an antagonist, but in this one, it's like, well, don't leave the house, you idiot. So it's, to me, it's really hard to say whether it's an antagonizing character or just, the weather is the one that's the antagonizer.
Yeah, because like Haunting of Hill House, when we watched The Haunting, the house is definitely a character. There's no question about it. This is a bit more ambiguous.
Yeah.
The house is by definition a setting. I know. I'm just.
You jerk.
But no. So that, yeah, I think this. So this tees up if Andrew's going to make a claim that this like paved the way for some teen horror genre kind of movies, you could say that like this is one of those steps on the evolution of haunted house stories, and like building maybe towards that, but I don't think it's there yet. It is like the quintessential like scary story situation. Like it is the one that gets spoofed on all the sitcoms. It is the one that gets spoofed on all the cartoon shows. Like we're driving and it's rainy and we get into a storm and then we drive up to this weird old house and we're going to go in there because it's all we got right now. Like that is everything. It's everything. It's the situation that sets up so many scary stories.
So it's interesting you bring that up, Eric. So while I was looking into the film and researching like the director, the actors, just the history of it, there are a couple of things that kind of kept popping up. So first off, it didn't do well in the box office. It got pulled out of theaters quickly. It was, to an extent, kind of lost to history, right? At least for a number of decades. But it wasn't until '68, apparently, a negative of the film was found in the Universal vault, and then it was, if you will, re-released or whatever it might be, but it actually became available to see again. And kind of going to what I kept seeing pop up, that resurgence of it or coming back, it appeared to have kind of a little bit of significance, even from that point on, for the scary house horror comedy genre. There were a lot of call outs of, like when you read articles about this film, they make mentions to the Rocky Horror Show on Broadway. I mean, then the eventual film, Rocky Horror Picture Show, or even like the movie Clue. There's a lot of similarities. I mean, even just the setting, right? In Clue, they're like you said, Eric, like the quintessential. I'm on a dark street and there's this big house. Either I'm going to, or it's like my only place to go. I mean, that's, you know what I mean? It's so similar in this case. Was that where they got some of the ideas, or was that just such built into them? Like that's just kind of something that you would do. And then the Rocky Horror Picture Show was another one that kind of kept coming up. Kind of goes into one of the last topic I kind of really want to talk about even more. But there's definitely a lot of similarities that I picked up on between the two. The one that was definitely kind of a small one, but I thought was kind of interesting, was the character Gladys. So Gladys had two names. She was Gladys Duquesne and Gladys Perkins. And she's kind of like hiding one name or the other. So that's kind of like a connection to the movie Clue. They come in, not supposed to say your real name. And then even another piece, after they finish dinner and eat their potatoes, Sir William Porterhouse comes around and is like, we've been sitting around this fire for all these hours and we don't know anything about each other. It's like so reminiscent to the film Clue, where they're like, we've been sitting here, we've been waiting for you, Wadsworth, and we don't know anything about these people. But I mean, they kind of do, because that's just kind of the other piece of the story. But they're sitting around, they don't really know necessarily about each other. So there's definitely a lot of, seems like similarities. Now, is it a fluke? Was it an influence? Hard to say. I mean, maybe you got to get in the head of the filmmakers for Clue, or for the people who wrote up the Rocky Horror Show for Broadway. Did you guys pick up anything else for those films or other kind of later films that maybe could have been an influence from this film.
Yeah, obviously the whole premise of, like we were saying, getting out of the storm, getting in the house goes across all three. But funny thing is that Horace, with the way he was afraid of just like everything happening, it actually, when I was watching it, it reminded me of Mr. Green, Michael McKean, in Clue, because he was afraid of every single thing that happened. He's always screaming, "What's going on?" So it was just, obviously they're very different actors. So to pick up on that, I was kind of like, huh, okay, Clue. All right.
So I could see a lot of Rocky Horror Picture Show. I know, like, I haven't actually seen the Rocky Horror Show, that like play, the stage version, but the Rocky Horror Picture Show, very familiar with. And that was in the car, that was in my notes, like in the car, first thing you see him driving, I was like, this is like the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Before even reading anything like that, I wrote that down, made that connection. And then it was like, I would continue to get like I could tell that was probably the old Dark House was an influence on Rocky Horror, because you have you kind of have this, like, we're meeting a character that when we get in the house, we're meeting more characters. We're kind of adding more characters and situations as it goes on, which happens through the Rocky Horror. Like we meet Rocky Horror kind of later in the movie, like Rocky later in the movie. And we meet Saul very late in this movie. There's like still characters coming in, it kind of had that same kind of like, this is rolling, this is happening. There's more layers of the pickled onion to peel. And we can keep getting down deeper into it. And it had a similar vibe like that. But yeah, no, I know, Mike, you got some stuff you want to say about it, but I do want to ask the horror people, are there, like, Rocky Horror was like, yes, for me, I could see Clue. Are there other like classic horror movies that have that like rainy, like, because like I would say from my limited knowledge, yes, both of these movies, Clue and Rocky Horror, that I've seen are inspired by this, but I don't have anything else to compare them to. So that's where.
I think the closest one is, for me, and one I already mentioned, which is The House on Haunted Hill with Vincent Price. Very much has some of those humorous elements, definitely in the horror genre. And I can see how they could build upon what was like this base framework. Like, I feel like this movie, because you mentioned it did not do well financially, and they got pulled from the theater. For me, it felt more like a quick screen adaptation, more of a short film that got played out a little bit longer. It didn't feel like a full feature-length film. It's a short movie. And so I could see how this set some foundations that people may have watched, but if it got pulled that quickly, the people that saw it probably were more in the 60s when it was rediscovered, reprinted. And then that's when we start having the House on Haunted Hill and other haunted house movies. So I could see that.
There's another thing I want to add in with another example of how it's connected to the Rocky Horror picture. Well, it's Rocky Horror just general. So in the beginning of Rocky Horror, where Janet comes in and needs to dry off, so she takes off all of her clothes, right? And she's in her underwear essentially for the entire film. It's kind of similar to this. I changed my clothes, and then she's wearing some sort of like nighty nightgown for essentially the entire film. So it was kind of like, did they just steal that from here? Because that was really, really like it almost seemed like too coincidental, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of brings me to the last topic. So I personally did not pick up on this as I watched the film the first time. I did watch it a couple more times. So after I watched the first time, I kind of did some searching online, researched it, and another kind of thing that came up occasionally was that was the old dark house kind of secretly a nod to the LGBTQ community. At first, I was like, okay, did I miss something? And when I watched it again, it really were a handful of things that I missed that could arguably be it. And as I dived more into the people in the film, I could see where they were going with this. So first off, the actor who played Sir William Porterhouse, he was generally believed to be bisexual in the Hollywood community at the time. And even his character in the film, it's like his companion Gladys. It's not like a romantic partner, but it's like a companion. And they actually even say, "Oh, he's rather gay." I mean, at the time, you could say that was just like happy and free, carefree and such. But was that a kind of a nod to that community? Because obviously nowhere near what they could have done when Rocky Horror come out, or even in today's world. And then probably the biggest one was James Whale, the director. He was openly gay in Hollywood at the time when the film was made. And even the film Gods and Monsters that came out in '98 is based on a novel that centers around him. Did you guys pick up on anything else that was kind of a nod to say, hey, we're here and we're part of this community? We're just kind of hiding that a little bit in there. Was that James Whale's kind of thought of this? Is like, this is an ode and it will last forever in this film that's going to be out in the market forever. Did you guys pick up on anything? There are a couple of things I'll start with one, and we kind of talked about this already, is with Rebecca and Margaret, when Margaret is changing. So where Rebecca comes in the room with her and starts like kind of chastising her about like she does everything to please her man, and kind of degrades her, and even kind of sounds like her sister. Kind of is a similar person, but is it like kind of hide some sort of like hidden lesbianism type of thing with Rebecca? It seems like is he trying to place that ever so subtly in the film? Did you guys pick up on anything else in the film that could have kind of hinted at that?
So I love the movie Gods and Monsters. It's a great film. And Ian McKellen does a wonderful job playing James Whale. And it talks a lot about how a lot of Hollywood was not accepting of his sexuality. That they, it was all kind of hush hush, but people knew. So watching it, I felt like the character Saul was supposed to represent himself, being locked away, not to be seen, not to be talked about because of his sexuality. And then when Saul does come out and he's down there, he's immediately calling, what's his name? Roger. He's calling him, he's saying, you're my friend. I love you. And it was very strange for someone to just meet and be like, you're my friend. I love you. So it seemed to me like maybe James Whale was trying to turn Saul into that metaphor for his own sexuality that was being locked up to keep his career going, basically.
I mean, you could totally spin the narrative around based on what we're talking about post-war World War One, and you can spin that entirely into a metaphor for the feelings someone has that are locked away inside them. Each character is a different emotion, thinking Inside Out. There's my Disney reference. And they each can represent an aspect of the feelings of having to kind of hide oneself within, and you're within this old dark house, and these feelings are all contained. So I think you can view it in that way as well.
Or yeah, like so you bringing it up, Rob, is the first I ever really gave it a thought, and it really makes a lot of sense. And I think too, like if we look back at like when we watched previously Glenn or Glenda, that was in the 50s. And when Ed Wood was making that movie, it was like a big deal, even though he did it poorly. It was like a big deal that he was going to address like these LGBTQ that like issues, but he wasn't like, you know what I mean? Like they don't even have the same like understanding and terminology and whatnot, like to like talk about it today that we have, versus like that was the 50s when he was trying to make Glenn or Glenda Ed Wood. This would have been even earlier in Hollywood. So yes, definitely, if you were going to tell that story, you have to keep it very coded. It wouldn't have got made otherwise. So if this is a if this is an LGBTQ story, it is nicely coded. It's there, but it's coded. But that is going to feed into my narrative of this kind of inspiring Rocky Horror even more so, because like that's a big movie in the community, and it has that one's not even coded anymore, but you could see how the creators of Rocky Horror could look at something like this, pick up on those cues and go, now we're going to do this in a big way. We're going to make this movie, but we're going to shine a light on the stuff that they couldn't shine a light on in the 30s. And we're going to do it in this like, 70s way.
In a flashy musical version on Broadway.
Make it right. Like, just this is it, you know what I mean? So like that would make me say even more so, is this the inspiration or like the outline of Rocky Horror? This is like the skeleton of it, if we want to get into like creepy horror October mood. This is the skeleton of Rocky Horror that it could be built on,
So there's two other things that I caught, and I wonder if any of you else caught it. So when what's the word I'm thinking of? You have to cut this part.
Or I'll leave it in. No.
Or leave it in, even better.
Just kidding.
But not to ruin the story for everyone. If you're listening, Saul dies in the end, right?
Spoiler alert.
I'm sorry for everyone. I ruined the story. So throughout the entire film, Morgan shows like little to no emotion, right? Little to nothing. Other than just like anger or just like distaste for everyone. But at the moment Saul dies, he actually begins to cry a little bit. So does it show some sort of like relationship that the two had? I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean it had to be an intimate relationship, but that type of connection that might have been like, that's what makes him break, if you will, from this big anger-filled character, right? So it's something there along those lines. Now, the last piece, which I don't know if any of you picked up from either.
I want to feed off of what you just said real quick. I mean, you can read it that way, but then another way to look at it is based on things like the father said, the only reason that they had kept Morgan around was to keep Saul in check. And so maybe him seeing that Saul is gone, now he sees that I have no purpose. I serve no purpose now. Yeah. So there's that way to look at it too.
I'm going to go back to, I'm going to agree with Rob for a second and go back to that notion though, because this is coded stuff here. Of course, we're not going to outright say it. If we say that the reason to keep Morgan around is because he keeps Saul in check, they never actually, from what I can remember, correct me if I'm wrong, they never actually say it's because he's got to physically restrain him. They lead you to believe that.
That's fair.
But if there is some sort of connection and Morgan's the only one that could like talk Saul down, because I wondered until this moment, I wondered with the tray of food, like, because that was outside of the tray of food, locked door.
Yeah.
I was like, how does the food get in the door? And so like Morgan has to bring it in there. But if it was a physical grappling thing, Morgan would sometimes be bested at first because Saul might always be ready to come through the door. But if it's not, if it's a companionship thing, if it's a friendship, relationship, whatever it is, he would be able to walk in there, have a conversation, talk Saul down. As much we don't know that, we don't know their relationship, and then leave the room and lock it without having an actual physical struggle.
Yeah, I guess thinking about things like that in those terms, if truly Morgan has a relationship that is more meaningful than what we're initially led to believe is just physically restraining and putting him back in his chained up room, I guess it does kind of explain, because what I had been struggling with up until this moment was the idea that Morgan is a fairly weak character, not weak physically, but just weak in general, not fully developed. They basically say when they introduce him that, oh, a night like tonight will set him off drinking, and when he's drinking, he turns violent, and then that's exactly what happens. So it's all very predictable, but maybe it's because he can't be with Saul or whoever he wants to be all the time, and has to, again, closet or hold in these emotions and feelings. So I like that. I think that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, even to add on to that, Mike, there was the one scene, the kind of the creepy part where Saul starts to come downstairs and his like hand creeps down. Then you see Morgan come down like in front of Saul. You didn't even see Saul yet, and he's like got a big smile on his face. Like, I think it's like one of the first bits of emotion as well. So I think it kind of adds, like, how do you go from like zero to no, like zero emotion essentially for everything, and then all of a sudden it's like your face lights up when you see someone, right?
Yeah, that face though, that was not so much the look of pleasure, but more the look of yeah, you effed around and you're about to find out.
But I think Eric, you had a good point though. Like this is so early on with including any kind of messaging from the LGBTQ community. It has to be so coded. So you could probably talk this over so many times, right? Because he had to hide it so well. Now, the last bit, and I don't know if any of you picked up on this, or even just through like IMDb or anything. So the father, Sir Roderick Fem, was credited in the film as John Dudgeon, but the actual person playing the character was Elsbeth Dudgeon, a woman. And if you rewatch the film, now you could say it's an old man, and he's in the movie. I say he because it's Sir Roderick Fem, sounds like a woman, has a mustache or a beard like an old man would, and then kind of some prosthetics, but played by a woman. Is also, I mean, in Hollywood, I mean, to say you try to find an old man, like, is it that hard for the little time that he was in the film?
So,
or was it very purposeful that he had a woman play a man?
Yeah, so that's either the case, or from what I've read, it sounds like they literally were getting ready to shoot the film and they did not have an actor for that part. And this wasn't in Hollywood. I believe it was filmed overseas. And so they just had someone that was around and put the makeup on and went from there. So, but your way would make more sense. That would give more reasoning behind that move. So
I actually read that James Whale purposefully kept the entire cast from knowing that it was a woman until the cast wrap party. So I think he did it as another subtle nod to what he had to conceal.
yeah, and the story that I read might have been the cover story that was told to everyone else.
Yeah. But also of interest is the fact that Elspeth, in her career, she was in over 60 films, but was uncredited in like 80% of them or something. Yeah.
That's one of the other crazy parts is, 1932, Boris Karloff had 10 films in 1932. So this is a period in Hollywood where it's the film mill, like they are just cranking. So something like this gets made because there's a lot of money going around, changing hands. Anyone that can basically halfway direct a film is getting backing. So they're able to make these more unique films that may not be mainstream.
Yeah. That's too many movies to make in a year. He forgot he was in this one. Like he would just forget he was in. Was I in that? Oh yeah, I was in that one.
I was a silent character that was angry.
Yeah.
Which one was?
So watching it, I knew something was up. Like with the character, I couldn't tell you for sure, but that at the moment that that's a woman or a man playing the father character, but you could tell something was different with that character. You know what I mean? You could kind of tell. But yeah, no, that kind of confirms it. But then as we were talking about and saying femme, I got to go back to the coding too, because even the term femme is like gay coded. It's all like even that, like, so there's so many, you've convinced me, even though I didn't think that before we started talking about it. So yeah, no, that's it. You got it.
I mean, he's a talented filmmaker. I mean, good directors know how to put subtle things into films and let them sit there until they're found potentially years, decades later.
And femme is the last name used in the novel. So again, makes me curious about the novel.
True.
Well, I'll have to read it and do a podcast on it.
Yeah. Next.
We'll do that and the 1960s version.
They get a series.
It'll be Rear Cuts Extra Innings. No.
But a lot of major actors in this film. Because there's the actor who plays Horace. He's also in Bride of Frankenstein. So it's kind of nice to see him in another role. And he still brings that sort of cadence that he has in this movie to Bride of Frankenstein. But it's just nice to see what else they were working on in that same time frame.
And that Elspeth was also in Bride of Frankenstein.
Yep.
It's a gypsy woman or something.
The one that's always screaming. Ugh.
All right. So now that we've discussed the Old Dark House, we have to go into our new scoring mode. And we're going to be scoring everything for rarity, how well it fits the theme, and the enjoyment level on a scale from 0 to 5. And of course, we will pass it over to Rob to get his scores from all three of us.
All right. So I'm looking for 5s from everybody.
Big money.
About that.
Big money. No whammies. All right. So, Sir Jagoda.
All right.
How did you feel about the film? And remember, we're going to the football game on Sunday.
Wait.
No pressure. Well, as far as rarity goes, it was pretty rare. I couldn't bring myself to give it a full 5 on rarity just because of the fact that it's Boris Karloff, James Whale, Carl Laemmle, I think is how you say it. So big names in horror in the 30s. But it was a movie that I hadn't seen, and I hadn't known about it until now. So I'm going to give it a 4 on rarity. For theme, I'm going to go ahead and say it's October. This was a black and white 30s horror movie. Full 5 stars. Full 5 on theme. Scoring glitch there. And enjoyment. I thought this movie was great. I loved it. For if this was not October, maybe I would have given it lower, but I had to give it a 5 on enjoyment because it was just. I mean, I hate to give such a great score here, but I had to give it a 14 out of 15.
Rob's going to be the only one picking from now on.
Winner every time.
Not necessarily. I gotta give my scores.
Uh-oh.
I'll go right into mine. And honestly, if we go into rarity, I'm kind of on the same page with Jagoda. Like I don't know much about old horror movies, but when I see Karloff, it's like, okay, this one was probably pretty mainstream. Now we as we learned in watching it and getting into it, it was a little more rare than maybe we thought it was as far as the history goes. But I think because of how many things it inspired, there's too much DNA of it in other things for it to truly be super rare. So that's why I had to knock it down a peg to the 4. For theme, I also kept it in the 4 range. It does fit our Halloween theme, really, like, it's like the holidays. It doesn't necessarily, and I'm shooting myself in the foot for this right now. I know I'm going to say that. It doesn't necessarily fit the holiday exactly of Halloween. It is a scary story. It is a traditional scary story, but it could take place in any month that's rainy in England, which is all of them. So... So in that it's not specifically a Halloween one, I kept it down a point. And then finally, for my enjoyment, though in hindsight, talking about it and its kind of significance and all that kind of all the LGBTQ coding and all that stuff, it made it definitely more interesting having the discussion on it, but I still gave it a 3 for enjoyment. I'm not going to watch it again. It was fine to watch it. It's just not my thing. But for a horror movie, that's probably the best score you're going to get from me. So that's saying something. That's saying something for a horror movie. A 3 is pretty good. Some of those other ones that y'all have picked in the past, if we were scoring at the time, would have got 0s and 1s. It would have been like binary code up in here. So that gives me a, let's see, that would be a total of 11, right?
Yep.
If I could do math correctly.
All right. So rarity, I'm just going to go ahead and give you a 5 because the fact that this sat in a universal vault for 30 years, it's pretty rare. And when they re-released it, I'm going to guess that not many people went to see it. This was more or less Universal throwing out a movie. It's like, hey, look at this old Karloff film. Let's throw it out there and make a quick buck. That's what they did. So I love Boris Karloff, despite what Bela Lugosi may think. I can't say the things that he said about him here, but it's rare because I did not know about this Karloff film, and I'm going to guess that most people aren't aware of this film. And I'm going to guess that if people are familiar with it, they're going to be thinking of the 1960s one, which had a lot of famous actors in it. Highly recommend you checking it out just because you can find it free on YouTube to watch or one of the other free services. Yeah. So, but it's rare to me. So you got a 5. Theme, kind of the same thinking as Eric said. It's a horror, but it's not like a spooky Halloween horror. So you're going to get a 4 there. And enjoyment, I was fully ready to come in here and give it a 3 before we had this discussion, because it felt like a partial film. It felt like some ideas. Like, I really feel this could have been expanded upon. I'm really curious about the novel. Maybe I can pick up a copy and read it myself. But the movie did not feel complete. But after our discussions about what this movie might have actually been about, I think I have to move it up to a 4. So, a lucky 13. Spooky, right?
That worked out for spookiness. So if that is if that's how it all works out, double check my math, but that would give us the so that's going to give it the total score of a 38. All right.
Am I still invited to the Bears game?
Oh, of course. So 38
Right.
out of 45. Wow, that's a great start to this competition.
That is, now you won the mini game last month, and you're gonna get some sort of thing for that. For winning this round, we're gonna get a the person's gonna get a pick of a theme coming up too. So I'm gonna pop it over to the leaderboard so we can take a look at that real quick, and I have to do that with this button. Boop. All right, and there's
like sweet like NFL networks like jams over here.
All right, note to self: put some good. we have to get some NFL style music. It's in the notes. It will be under our voices right now as we speak. And people will hear that we said that it'll be very meta. So there we go. We've got the old Dark House from 1932 with a score of 38, but we've got more picks coming up. See that?
So that was our take on the 1932 rare pick, the old Dark House. Yeah, I think this movie is a lot more to it than what meets the eye. If you just watch it casually without thinking, it's kind of a nothing movie, really. So take the time and do the research, and then you get little nuggets of surprise of what you actually just watched. But now we're heading into November, turkey time. So, Eric, what do you got for us?
So this is where I said this is going to bite me later, because I said it wasn't like holiday appropriate, and mine's not necessarily holiday aligned. And I was like, God,
oh, we're gonna ding you.
And then why did I give you guys that? Why did I give you guys that information? But I'm gonna go with 1985's St. Elmo's Fire. Now, I also was concerned of the rarity of this one, but I got to ask the question right now: have any of you seen St. Elmo's Fire?
I have not.
I've seen parts of it.
So maybe it is more rare than I thought. For me, it's like super not rare, because it is one of those like defining Brat Pack movies, but because it's not John Hughes, it's not necessarily one that people think of all the time. But it's one of those big Brat Pack defining moment movies. So it is got a lot of those Brat Pack actors, some from The Breakfast Club, like Judd Nelson and Ali Sheedy, Emilio Estevez. It's got Rob Lowe playing some sweet saxophone. But it's a story that takes place in the fall after some students who graduated from Georgetown are kind of experiencing their first year out of college. So it's definitely a fall movie. It's kind of a coming of age film into adulthood. And whenever the pumpkin spice lattes come out and the leaves start changing colors and you feel that cool breeze, I always just get this like I should watch St. Elmo's Fire. It just feels right now. So I was like, all right, November, I got the pick. It's about like a Friendsgiving kind of friend group. We're going to watch St. Elmo's Fire. I'm so excited. And of course, if you want to go find St. Elmo's Fire, you can go. It's hard to find it streaming other than for a rental fee, but check your local public library because it was on a DVD tons of times, and I'm sure they have a DVD copy. Or go find a VHS copy from 1985, and then you'll have an authentic experience. But no, go ahead, go watch St. Elmo's Fire, get your turkey ready, and join us next time on the Rare Cuts Media Society. Visit us online at rarecutsmediasociety.com. There you can find old episodes, subscribe, or connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for listening.